you've not come across WACL before, it stands for Women in Advertising and Communications Leadership. So you hopefully saw on the way in, we're one of the founding partners of the Empower Cafe. But we really exist to fulfill one purpose in life, which is all about accelerating gender equality in the creative industry. Now, you may feel that DE&I of all forms is a bit less fashionable than it used to be, either in culture, in business, and particularly, I would say, in US businesses, which is ironic, really, because there's never been a more important time for us to bring some focus onto this topic. You know, if you look at the structural change, the technological change going on around us, it is really important that we're intentional about how we design, how we want to work in the future, if we even want to maintain the balance we have, let alone keep making progress. So that's what we're here all about today. WACL runs an ongoing program of research and campaigning, and we have identified 5 really practical levers for change that you can apply in your own business, in your own team. And across the week at Empower, you'll see there's a panel on each one of them. And today we're focusing on flexible first, how we retain women in the workplace and how we make work for absolutely everyone. So that's what we're going to talk about. I've got an amazing panel beside me to get the discussion going. So let me do some quick intros and then we'll get into it. First up, in the orange, we have Ali Hannon. Ali is Ali brought her fan club too. Ali is a creative leader in her own right. She is the founder and executive director of Creative Equals, which is the organization that measures the new ROI, Return on Inclusion. And she is also a proud member of WACL. Next along in the stripes, Kelly Gordon, founder and CEO of a business called With Not For, which is a great name, such a great name. And With Not For is a disability-founded talent and production company which exists with one job, really, which is to get more disabled creative talent into the industry everywhere. Finally, Chris Dunn. Chris is head of marketing at ThinkBox, which, as you will all know, is the voice of commercial television. He is also, because he's a very busy chap, he is also the CEO of Outvertising, which is the LGBTQIA plus advocacy group for the industry. And recent achievement, he is part of our inaugural cohort of male allies at WACL. So thank you all for being here. I think we're all switched on, but let's make a start. And I can see the time, sort of. Right, so let me come to you first, Ali. So as a creative leader and a champion of female creatives, can you tell us a bit about why you started Creative Equals and why you think how we measure people's output and contribution is so critical?
Hi, everybody. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here today. So when I first started out in the sector, by the way, in 1999, I'm really old, just 3% of creative directors in the UK were women, 3%. And the irony is women still make up to about 85% of all purchasing decisions. So the kind of, the who makes the work, shapes the work for the audience that we serve. There's just a massive disconnect there. So I actually gave up my job in 2016 to really think about how we could accelerate change because the numbers then had just gone up to 12%. And then for a brief moment in about 2022, they went up to 30%. So there was, they started to move and progress. But not just thinking, but just thinking about 2026. And I'm going to sound a bit like a doomslayer here. So excuse the hard punching data, but I think the numbers say it more than perhaps words can. So over the last year, we've actually lost about 6% of our female creative talent. That's 14.3% when it comes to creative agencies. And at the moment, 8% of creative agencies, across the board say they're going to cut talent because of AI coming in. When it comes to creative agencies, that number goes up to 30%. 30%. And of course, 24% of agencies are expecting to cut roles this year, Liz. Yeah. We know that vacancies are down 40%. And when it comes to our young people, we have lost, well, there's the cuts there, we've lost about 19.5% of all of those job roles. So again, if we think about who makes the work, shapes the work, and if we think about who works in marketing, shapes the marketing, the question we then have to ask is who does marketing work for? And when it comes to women, well, of course, only, I don't know whether you know this crazy stat, but 8% of women, only 8% of women are shown in non-traditional roles. So that means we're still showing 92% of women in traditional roles in our advertising. Now, for me, that is why Flexible First is one of the most critical mandates that WACL has, because if we think about creative output, we have to think about who's making that output, whose lived experience comes into the output, who we're keeping in terms of client retention, in terms of shaping that output, in terms of positive portrayal. What does that look like in 2026, particularly when almost 50% of young women are choosing to be child-free in the ages under 30? So Flexible First working has to come first, because one of the challenges we've had with the sector is challenges around presenteeism, challenges around being online at a specific set of times, lack of flexibility still around the school structure, some of the flexibility around the long holidays that kids have when it comes to schooling as well. So putting Flexible First at the front of the agenda is a critical way to keeping our parents, our mothers, and women in roles. And I think also thinking about shared parental leave, only 4% of the sector are currently picking up on shared parental leave. So making sure that dads take their fair share of paternity leave, which at the moment, sadly, is only 2 weeks under the under statutory leave. So making sure that agencies put that at the front of their agenda is critical as well, because at the end of the day, creativity is our competitive advantage. Every agency will tell you, creativity is the lifeblood of who we are and how we operate. But then we have to answer the question, who gets to shape that creativity, and how we are adapting our workforces to make sure that we're future fit and we're really accommodating women in our businesses, but more importantly in our work, in our thinking, in our structures, in our innovation, and all the things. So, yeah, that's why it is just so, in 2026, as everyone goes into job cuts and redundancy and restructuring, we have to be, I love your word, intentional about who's left at the end of it, because we know so far, looking at some of the restructures in the sector, that has not been front of mind. And, for example, I won't name the company, but, particularly no, don't do that. But in some of the restructures, we've ended up with like all male leadership teams. And we just have to really think different, make sure that we're thinking intentionally about women in the workplace and making sure that we represent all the audiences that we serve and who are making the purchases.
I mean, some hugely depressing stats in there, but some really useful insight. And I think a lot of the issues you pick up, yes, they relate to working mothers, but actually they relate to everybody in many ways.
Yes.
But Kelly, maybe we can talk a bit about your personal experience. You are a working mother, you're a founder, you're a CEO, you're a wheelchair user, you're pretty bloody busy. Tell us a little bit about how you founded With Not For, and how you've baked flexibility in for your talent and your colleagues.
Okay, thank you. So I think to start off with, just to say that my career looked very different before I had With Not For. I've been disabled. I've been a power wheelchair user since I was 11 years old. And I mean, to start, I was told, would I ever work? Would I ever have a good level of education? And the answer to that is no, because I wasn't interested in education and I took my own journey. But in terms of work, I wasn't welcomed into work. All I wanted to do when I came out of education was work, and I couldn't get an opportunity. I'm a very outgoing person, and I was like, I'll work behind a bar, I'll work in retail, I'll do whatever, and nobody would take me. So I had to really find my own career. And actually ended up somehow working in the football industry for a long time. That's an industry that's very much like advertising. It's so go, go, go. And I always felt that I had to prove myself to people. I had to be the one that was always on, like always switched on, always awake, always well, always ready to do the job, because I think as disabled people, we're so underestimated sometimes, and people expect us to not be there. They expect us to have loads of appointments or to be unwell or to need rest. And sometimes that's true, but obviously we need to make it so that those things can coexist and we can have the flexibility to be ourselves as people and also work. But yeah, I was always here, there and everywhere, and just really trying to prove myself and make a career for myself in a male-dominated, fast-paced football industry, and that was really hard. So I think for me, when starting with Not4, my co-founders, just in the front row there, when we started, we'd both had experiences of being in these fast-paced environments with little room for flexibility. And we just knew that we didn't want that to be the case with Not4. I mean, with Not4 is our namesake. You know, we work with people, whether it's our talent, whether it's our employees, to ensure they've got what they need to thrive. And that's something that we massively need as people as well. Like, we've both got disabilities and less apparent conditions. And just being able, and kids, we've both got kids, and that can be hard enough sometimes. So being able to have that flexibility to say, I need to switch off for a few hours, I'll catch you later. I mean, sometimes Emma and I do our board meetings from bed on an evening, and it works for us and it works for the business because, you know, we're highly successful, we're doing great, and we are being flexible in every which way. So that's hugely important, and it means that luckily we can give jobs to people that work in different time zones. We can give jobs to people that need to be on bed rest. We can give jobs to people that do have appointments. And we all just make it work. Like, there's a lot of WhatsApp groups pinging off, but we make it work. And I think, why would we want it any other way? Because allowing those people to come into our business and allowing ourselves to be the best version of ourselves is really what has gotten us to this stage and what will continue to help us grow. Oh, she's off.
Thank you. Chris, let's come to you now. Tell us a little bit about your personal experience of flexible environments and flexible first, and why the broader impact, the broader strategic rewards are different.
Well, you know, I'll start by saying I'm very lucky to work in highly flexible environment. At ThinkBox, it's always been baked into the culture of the organization. We are slightly older organization in terms of the people who are there. So people already with commitments, family commitments, a lot of people who work different hours or different days of the week. So it's baked into the organization from the get-go. And at advertising, you know, we're a completely volunteer organization, and we don't have an office. We don't have working hours. So everybody has to fit in their responsibilities and their deliverables in and around their other, life, jobs or home life. So it's fundamental that flexibility is at the core of that. But I would say, like a lot of people, if I roll back, say, 10 years ago, I always looked at something like flexible working and thought, well, that's not necessarily something that I benefit from. I broadly, support it and encourage it and think it's a good thing. But not being a parent, not planning to be a parent, it's easy to look at something like that and believe, well, that's great, but not for me. But then, you soon discover that life can take over, and you might find yourself in circumstances where you really need flexible working. Even just the last couple of years, my husband was very sick and had an extended holiday time. My dad was terminally ill last year, so I was doing a lot of traveling, caring, extra responsibilities. But having flexibility already built into our organization meant that I could still meaningfully contribute. I could work when I could work, and it was a lifeline, actually, to still be able to work. I didn't ever have to feel that I was letting down a team or that I was letting anything slide. So that was just an eye-opener to show that a policy like Flexible First has the ability to reach each and every individual. And I think that the pandemic was kind of it was a bit unhelpful, I think, in flexible working, because I think it's easy for us to mix up hybrid working and flexible working. They're really not the same thing. Hybrid working is just about where you are working. It's not about how you're working or how the work is getting done. And I think during the lockdowns, I don't know about anybody else, but I didn't find it very flexible at all. You didn't have anywhere else to go. So you were quite fixed. People knew where you were, and your hours of the day were pretty structured. So as we've come into this period now of this slow drift back to the office, which has many benefits, I'm sure we'll talk about, there is a real risk that flexibility in working becomes a victim of this drift, and the presenteeism that used to be very present in a lot of organizations in our industry starts to creep back in. And those that will lose out are those that obviously flexibility was designed to serve first and foremost. And that points to even worse stats from Ali in the future.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk a little bit, since we're in Cannes. You touched on doing different types of work, different times, different places, different ways. I think we've all touched on that in one way or another. Thinking about creativity in particular, since here we are in Cannes, and why wouldn't we? Do we think that flexible working is a help or a hindrance to creativity and collaboration more generally? And I'll throw it open now. It's now a free-for-all.
I'll start, if that's okay. I think absolutely. I mean, I don't know about any of the other creatives in the room, but for me, as a creative, I can't force creativity. And also as an entrepreneur, I think if you're forced to sit there and do something, it can be incredibly hard to do it. And also as women, for me, I was just saying the other day to my business partner that I was in my luteal phase of my period, and that makes me feel incredibly unproductive and incredibly not myself. And so just having that flexibility to say, I'll see how I am later. And I think on that night I came out with so much work that needed doing, but also so much work and so many ideas that were really impactful. But had I sat there and forced myself through the day to do that, it could have been a completely different outcome. So I think absolutely you've got to go when the creativity comes, and also enjoy your work, because we do it a hell of a lot. So if we can't enjoy it, then that's not a great place to be.
A question for the audience. Who gets their best ideas in the office? Exactly. I think almost like I rest my case. But, I think actually we've been lucky enough to have some incredible talent working in our business. And we always hire for incredible talent first. And one of the women I hired, she had a terminally ill disabled son. And she couldn't find anybody else. I've met her at a former job at Blipper. And she was incredibly talented, but she would work when her son was in the hospital, when her son was, at the physio and waiting rooms, any time of the night. Because the thing about, to your point, creative ideas come everywhere. They come when you're walking the dog, particularly actually in the shower. They're often in those sort of points where you're not really thinking about anything and your brain's able to make these connections. So creativity is a flexible first skill set, I would argue. So we have to therefore adapt the timetable to suit the fact that creativity can happen at any point. And really, offices are where you go and put everything together with the team. And you have the discussions about how we're going to put this together and what's the best way, what's the line, and perhaps have debates about the structure or the craft. But the best ideas come in the middle of the night. So flexible first is an imperative for the sector. Yeah.
Well, I would just add, if the question is, can flexible working damage creativity, then I'd flip it and say, does inflexible working enhance creativity? It doesn't make more creative environments. It's the serendipity. And you can't make serendipity happen, but you can increase its chances of happening by, intentionally being in space together, but then also having the flexibility for people to have their, creative moment outside of those 9 to 5:30 hours.
So you all lead teams, companies. When you think about how flexibility changes people's relationship with work, their emotional feelings about work. Have you got some good examples of why it could be a benefit to somebody who's here today thinking, right, I need to get more flexible? What sort of upsides could they look forward to?
I keep going first, I'm really sorry, but I think just bringing those opinions through that are left out. For us, obviously, we work with some people that are completely unable to travel. Myself included, I was on bed rest for 3 months, and without work at that time, it would have been an incredibly difficult, well, even more difficult time. I broke my hip. I wasn't feeling myself, but being able to have that creative outlet was so important. And the point is, if people are in those situations and they can't make it into an office, or they can't show up in a way that the industry wants them to show up, then their voices are being completely left out of the conversation. And it's wrong, but equally those voices are some of the most impressive creatives with the best ideas, because they've lived a life. And for me, bringing my lived experience, whether it's a campaign about disability, whether it's a campaign about something else, that lived experience always ekes through, because it's my life and it's rich and it's varied. And so we have some of our best creatives that call in from Zoom lying down in the bed, and that's okay, because those ideas are amazing, those people are amazing, and I wouldn't want it any other way.
I'd go back to kind of my own example, being given the flexibility to continue to work when life has gotten difficult, but the trust that's put in you as an individual is so powerful to your motivation and your commitment to what you're there to do. So if, we're constantly always looking at ways to optimize teams, to improve motivation, to improve productivity, outputs, whatever that might be. But there's a magic in empowering somebody to feel trusted, and how that can power every other way that you're measuring your talent. So if you're looking for a kind of hard to define but very tangible benefit, it's the power of being trusted and how that will play out in every other metric of performance for your teams.
Yeah, I'm going to echo you there, Chris. Actually, I think trust is, of course, we're all adults, we're all grown-ups, and we all, of course, everything has to, as business leaders or people managing teams, we have to be really clear about the outputs that we're expecting and deadlines. So yes, there can be flexibility, but of course we really, we want to make sure everybody is, producing their best work, and that as long as the deadlines are clear, the outputs are clear, the reviews are clear, everyone knows when they have to hit their own milestones. Everything else can shift around that. But I think trust is just so important. People have to, when they feel trusted and respected, they're going to show up for your business. They're going to be incredibly loyal to you. They're going to give you, they're going to, give you so much back. So I think actually the relationship between you as business leaders and your employees becomes stronger, more powerful, more, and they're going to be turn around and give you their best creativity, which is ultimately what we want from them.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's very hard for an employer to be trusted by all of us if we don't feel trusted by our employer, isn't it? It's a real two-way street. Thinking about some of the challenges of flexibility, though, we talked a little bit when we met the other day about boundaries, needing to set our own boundaries if we're not going to have boundaries set by a big employer. Can you say a little bit about that? What you think works well, what the challenges are?
Shall I start now? Okay. I think the pandemic was unhelpful in eroding some of those boundaries. And I think also the growth of the technology that we use to communicate now in the workplace, again, has eroded boundaries. So, many people here will have lots of work WhatsApp groups. So, that's a platform that started off as a messaging platform for your friends and family, and now your work is penetrated into that. So that can be very easy to blur those two things. I always have you seen The Devil Wears Prada 2? Of course you have. Yes, of course you have. Yeah, most people here will have seen that. And one of the things that struck me was, in the 20 years between those two films, the kind of absence of boundaries in that workspace hasn't changed at all in those 20 years. You know, you're expected to be present and available, and your willingness to do whatever it takes at whatever time of the day at whatever cost is a signal of your professional ambition, you know. So that's the warning that we should all be looking towards, is making sure that we are cognizant of the blurring of boundaries. We no longer have the strict working day, and how we build some guidelines and structures to make sure you can have that blend of flexibility, but a greater ability to switch off. I think the teams I work with now find it far harder to switch off fully than they did even, certainly pre-pandemic.
I think for me, because I worked in football, and I was in football concierge, which is a bit like the devil wears Prada, to be honest. You've got so many footballers texting you all the time in the middle of the night. They're locked out of nightclubs and God knows what. So I've grown up in that environment since the age of 21. And I don't think I'm 37 now. I don't think I've turned off my phone since I was 21. And that's not even a joke. It's quite bad. And WhatsApp, I agree with you. It's so helpful because for me, it's an instant attention grabber. I always see emails as the long list and WhatsApp as the short list. And if anyone needs me, just come straight to the top. But it's not great. It's not good for us. It is a platform, like you say, Chris, that was really for having fun, talking to friends and family, and now it is, very work related. But also my life and my business is work, and I absolutely love what I do. I love the people that I work with. The one thing I really struggle with massively is mom guilt, and really having to carve out that time for the kids, because I've got a nearly 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and my nearly 9-year-old's quite emotionally dependent at the moment, and so spending time with him is literally the most important thing I can do for him and for our relationship. So I carve out that time after school to take him to play football and make sure I'm present with him, and I'm getting quite good at saying, okay, everyone, I'm just, I'm at the football field, I'll be back on at 7, or I'll be back on at whatever time. But that is a boundary that I've started to add now. And I do think it's really important because the family do start to miss out otherwise, and you don't see it at the time because you're in it. And then I think you really do have to make the allowances to ensure that you're not just all about work, that there's a good work-life balance, which I think we're probably all working on.
Yeah, and I'm with you, Kelly, in the founder life, because of course, flexible working is working a lot, and all sorts of hours that you have to get the work done. And in fact, I've got a strip at the bottom of my email. Of course, I'm a flexible first worker, but email me back at a time to suit you. But actually, we're very boundaried with our own team, so we've got like a rule that you can't email each other before 9 o'clock and also after 6 o'clock, just so that people aren't getting team emails that they feel like they have to respond to out of hours. And particularly when you've got remote workers, it's really important to have those boundaries with your email, the expectations around when people are expecting a reply back. So yeah, I think boundaries are really important, but having your own team boundaries, and then obviously working with clients can be quite different. Often if you do have a emergency, after hours, of course you're going to reply. So I think this sector is particularly notorious for that, like just being, always on to the, in service of, our brands and our clients. But of course, they have their own internal mandates as well. So it's also just understanding what their policies and practices are so that you can match up with theirs.
Yeah, I sometimes think being always on is a way to feel that your work is quite important, isn't it? And we perhaps need to get over ourselves a little bit. Okay. Let us go for one final question before we throw it open to the audience. If I'm sitting in the audience thinking, okay, I want to roll out something brilliant, what is one thing you've noticed in another industry, another culture, another country that is a kind of a flexibility that you think is really great and you'd really love to have? Chris, why don't you start and then I can...
I guess this is less about a flexible arrangement, but in a culture where flexibility is quite a big part of corporate life, Sweden, I did a little bit of research, they have a thing called fika. you've got to be careful how you say it at work. We're going off to
Yeah.
fika. But it is it's a timed, scheduled coffee break
Yeah.
with colleagues. It appears to be mandatory to have some kind of pastry or cake during
Yes.
fika, but it's very revered in the Swedish workplace as an essential component for building culture. So if we are going to have a more flexible way of working, we have to intentionally carve out moments where our culture is building, where we are getting to know other humans without distraction, and where perhaps, yes, some of those creative ideas might flourish, but it's everyone respects it. Respect the fika. So I would coming to a workplace soon.
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story about that before we continue. I did try to impose fika on a group of kind of like really hardcore developer talent. And it turned out they just really didn't want to talk to each other. They wanted to just get on with what they were doing, and I should just leave them the hell alone. So I think flexibility has to be adaptable to who you're talking to, doesn't it?
I think the word impose was the clue
Yes,
there.
it is.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Kelly.
Yeah, I think what you just said really about flexibility, has to work for people. And I was trying to think about a culture, but I just think really like if we take it back to the fact that we're all human and we all have different needs and we all have different access needs, that would be my kind of goal, is to kind of reflect that into the office and don't have a sort of set of strict boundaries, more have a plan that works for each person and try and make that work for everyone as a group. Because I just honestly think, when you respect people's communication styles, their access needs, the times of the day they like to work, you have a really productive, engaged team. And, Ali, earlier you were saying about trust. I think that's incredibly important. And you were saying about loyalty as well. I find that, when I was an employee, I always had loyalty to the employers that would respect me, would not chain me to the desk all day, and would understand what I needed as a human first. And so I don't think anyone really takes the mick. I think anybody that has a lovely experience with an employer that feels respected, feels trusted, they will give that back tenfold, because they'll realise that that's quite rare. And sadly, I don't think it should be rare, but it still is. So I think that's what I would sort of take from society rather than the world.
Yeah, I think I'm going to tell you a little story, actually. And I think actually one thing that we should think about is the power of the lunchtime, and perhaps even the power of, God forbid, the nap. So there's a story about Thomas Edison, and one thing he used to do is he used to spend his mornings getting all his input. And he'd do deep dives into different ideas, different bits of thinking, to come up with obviously some world-changing innovations. And then what he would do is he would pick up a couple of balls and he would put them in his hands. And after he'd spent a whole morning absolutely building up all the knowledge base in his mind, he would just sit there and he would recline in his favorite armchair. And just as he was beginning to nod off, of course the balls would drop to the ground. But it was in those moments when he was just beginning to drift off to sleep that he would come up with his best ideas. And so, therefore, he would knit things together in his head, and then he would go back to the afternoon to the drawing board and actually make some of his, some of our huge technological innovations. So I think that idea of just having free thinking time, and I think to your point, Chris, which I think is really interesting, is I'm a morning person. I am on fire at between 6 and 10 o'clock. But actually, when it comes to the afternoon, I'm not that productive. So I have to think about how I'm using my energy. I have a strategy director who's on from, he switches on at 8 o'clock, he's on to 12 o'clock at night. But, it's fine because he'll still bring the work in. We all start at 9:30, between 9 and 9:30, but he'll bring his best work in the morning. But that's fine because I think we've all got the times that we actually, think our best thoughts and do our best work. So it's just honouring that, but also honouring the space that we actually need to think and not just do, but think. So, yeah, that's my parting wisdom.
Yes. The power of send later. It's, okay. Great. So throwing it open to you, we've got a few minutes left. We're almost out of time. We've got a few minutes left to take one, maybe two questions. If anybody is feeling brave and bold and wants to ask anything about Flexible First. No? Stunned silence.
We've been very comprehensive, haven't we?
I know. Well,
Yeah.
we obviously have. We've covered it all. Okay, well, look, thank you all for coming down to Empower this morning on day one of Cannes when you're feeling sprightly and energetic. It's been great to have you all here for the morning. Lots more to discover about Flexible First on the WACL website. There's a brilliant Flexible First toolkit, a checklist. So if you are thinking about how you can adapt to be more flexible with your team, there's lots of great resources there. But hopefully this morning has also given you a few ideas, a few little insights and some great tips around cake and naps in particular, which I remember particularly. So thank you very much to Ali Hannon, Kelly Gordon and Chris Dunn for being our guests this morning.